Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to welcome you to a new lecture of the International Campus Waldorf, and I'm especially um, enjoyed very much to welcome my dear colleague, Dr. Ida Oberman. Ida Oberman is a former Waldorf student. She did a Waldorf teacher training in Stuttgart, a Waldorf student from Tübingen, teacher training from Stuttgart. And for a long time now, she lives in the US. As far as I know, lately, a couple of years ago, she received the citizenship of the US. And she is the founder of, and she did a doctorate at Stanford University in the field of education, especially in Waldorf education. And she's the founder of the Community School for Creative Education in Oakland, California, which is a wonderful school in a very poor area, a school for the non-privileged children. She often presented the wonderful results of this school in our international campus. Today, she is going to speak about the topic, how trauma sensitive is Waldorf education. So thank you for being with us. And lately, I would like, last, I would like to say that she's a senior lecturer at Alanus University right now. So we work together very closely. Also in the ENASTE group, we work together. So thank you for being here, Ida. And I would like to ask you to start with your talk.
Thank you so much, Jost, and thank you, everybody. Can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, good. Well, it is just a very special joy to be together with you today for many reasons, but I want to highlight three. One, wonderful to follow in the wake of Ruhi last week on holistic education as we now think about trauma-sensitive education. The other is that I've been approached by an esteemed publishing house to write a book on this topic. So I very much was happy when Jost invited me because I wanted to ask you all to be critical friends and sounding boards. And with that, I would like to ask you if you are willing to take on a task as I offer my remarks. And the task is to listen and think about three things. You can then put it in the chat and hopefully share it as time allows. One is, what is something you really like in my remarks? One is something that makes you wonder in my remarks. And what is something you think I should drop in my remarks as I move to publication of this book, which is for a broad US and English-speaking audience. So thank you very much for taking on this job if you are willing. So that means you can't be doing your emails during my remarks or having too much joy of your cup of coffee, but just keep that pen pointed and take notes and help us all learn together. With this, I'd like to start by sharing a couple of slides that I've prepared to then hopefully enter into an engaged conversation. Rosa, could you kindly begin the sharing the PowerPoint?
Yes, it should appear any. Yes, there it is.
Yes, thank you very much. So welcome again, and we can advance. In my brief remarks, I'd like to shape it in the following way. We're going to ask ourselves, to borrowing on the Who song from the 80s, for those of us who have birth years that have a 1 and a 9 in the first two digits, are the kids all right? Secondly, I'd like to think about who we're going to call if they're not. And thirdly, think about the Waldorf moment this might mark, and with it, the chances and challenges it brings, and then focus on three best practices and 3 lessons learned to then end with a call to action for all of us. Next slide, please. It won't come to surprise of many of us that our children and youth are in unprecedented levels of distress. The highly regarded publishing house Insight Center just in May of 23 came out actually with a report detailing how kids, and they use the same title, are not all right. And this predates COVID to the short end of COVID, 124% of mental health in hospital admission increase. Of those, 250% are admissions for anxiety and fear-related disorders, so not physical. Of these, also, 221 are depressive disorders. Just under 50% are increase in mental health emergency visits, and just under 75% are increase in emergency department suicidal ideation. Higher rates of mental health are disproportionately affecting children, and the largest increase, it's disproportionately affecting young adolescents and disproportionately affecting girls. Also, disproportionately, as sadly always, affecting the most vulnerable. Next slide, please. The impacts are not just from COVID. Some of you might be aware of the gun epidemic in our country. Tragically, and I wasn't aware of this stark statistic till I was preparing for my remarks here, that right now gun violence is the leading cause of death of adolescents and children in the United States. The framework is again the United States. A humbling shift, and here too, disproportionately those who are most vulnerable. Next slide, please. And you will be getting this slide so you can always check the sources also. Before we go beyond the gun violence statistic, a note on the statistic. The spike in gun violence is no longer over there and in that community. The spike in gun violence is affecting schools, and it is affecting school shootings. I'm sorry, we will be getting to that slide next. Let me just stay here with our youth and mental health crisis. It's not just the COVID impact and the gun violence threats. It is other impinging effects, such as a deep isolation due to more time on social media, which results in constantly feeling isolated, all too often bullied, often looking at yourself and feeling not sufficiently up to it, and feeling lack of connectivity and impact with the world without. In fact, we had a very important study done by Edweek, Michael Smith, who just recently came out with an article arguing that given all this challenge, we can no longer rely only on health providers, therapy providers out of school, not even on therapy and health providers in school. We must look at school itself. Next slide, please. The question is, how can a school handle this? The therapists there are insufficient therapists right now across the country, certainly school therapists. Waiting rooms are in long lines. And in fact, those of you who are following the political news in the US, you will know that as of this Friday, in 3 days, these numbers are going to become even more spark with the impact of the cuts in the support for insurance and in the cuts for food and other provisions. What this means is that families have to reshuffle their resources to provide what they see as most needed, and all too often, therapy feels like a luxury item if it's between that and food on the table, especially if the cost of health insurance has spiked, but for some by 70%, and the school food support has waned. Next slide, please. So no more important time than now for us to think about this. Before we go into how we get here, one more point on the gun violence, because it is such an indicator. The spike in gun violence, I think, is broadly known well beyond the borders of the United States. What might be less known is that those who have a monetary advantage to make are being very nimble to step into that breach. There is now actually since 2019, when I was still running my school, it was the first time that I was mandated for our school to buy active shooter insurance. And take that in. Active shooter insurance assumes that the insurance is already saying you want to buy insurance for when a shooter comes into your school and hurts your children and your community. So that was already in 2019. Secondly, then it became mandated by the state to get active shooter insurance. And just the year after, in 2020, active shooter drills became mandatory in some districts. And now I just checked also in the Waldorf schools around, like the Waldorf school you will be visiting in my remarks in Pasadena, California, and the Waldorf school that is my own and community school for creative education. We have to do active shooter drills. What that means is that children are practicing for a shooter to come through the halls and then what they should do to keep safe. Now, there's something missing in this picture. So we have the insurance coming, we have the public policy coming. What is not being addressed? What is not being asked? I want to pause for a second. What is missing? Well, let me answer my own question for a minute. Nobody is thinking what that means for teachers and students in terms of learning and growth. How are we incorporating it? How can the teachers handle it and then overcome the trauma of thinking there's an active shooter? And then how can the children do it? I should say that Rosa Balzanaro, who I will be sharing about further, has already done an imaginative play with her kindergartens of the little animals coming and tapping around, and we don't want them to hear us, so we're going on our desk. But that is not what the state is mandating, and that takes a creative act. So we understand this question of trauma-sensitive education and what it looks like is literally coming into our classroom doors. So how did we get here? How did we get to a moment where trauma-sensitive education is demanded of us? There's muteness in terms of how to do it. Teacher education schools are not learning how to do it. And the need is spiking. Well, if we think back to our wonderful public education system, we remember that we are indebted to Germany's own Bismarck, Chancellor Bismarck at the end of the 19th century, who modeled and made prominent the wonderful public education where children would learn to show up on time, to follow rules, and be responsible. The factory model of school. Now, Bismarck, those of you who studied his rich biography might know he was not a warm and cuddly guy. He was not a kind of holistic education kind of guy. And the other person he took a page from was Napoleon, previous century, who really started the first mandated education, public education. Also not warm and cuddly, very much how do you get the group to follow the rules, be on time, and identify as one collective. School as a factory model. And if you see the school here on the right, it is actually built as a factory. And this was very typical from when public education started in the US until roughly the 1980s. Next slide, please. In the 1980s, something really hard happened. We got the news of what was known as a nation at risk, and a presidential commission had tracked how well we're doing academically compared to our international competitors, mostly the Russians. And we found that we were really lagging behind. And the famous statement was that if you wanted an alien party to do deep damage to America, you would give them America's public education system. We are a nation at risk. And the way we responded then, and I say we, yes, I'm very proud still to be a Dutch citizen, but I'm bi-national. I'm also American, so you get the rough and the smooth. The way we responded was by doing more of everything we were doing. Longer school days, more academics, more testing, less play, less art, and less time focused on things outside of learning facts. We wanted to build a group of fluent scientists, mathematicians, readers, and writers. We did not think beyond that. We thought that's the way this nation would become strong to compete the Russians and beat Sputnik in the air. Next slide, please. So that was our second phase. The first was until the 1880s, then 1880 to 1890, really the impact of getting more and more focused on academics. You see the textbooks getting bigger and bigger and children shouldering very heavy books to school. Then came a stark moment. Enter something that had been coined actually in Germany by Humboldt in the previous century, but now came to America, the term of holistic education. Why? Because of brain research. Brain research, and that was new technology, found one, that the brain is a living organism, and secondly, that it needs to be stimulated, and stimulated not just through a lot of input of any sort, but rich language, rich experiences, rich movement. And the concept of head, heart, and hand started to enter the terms of phrase. It wasn't yet coined to Waldorf, but it came through the broader recognition through cognitive research and seeing how our neurons fire in our brain, that we needed to engage, we needed to nurture the neuro passageways. We needed to continually nurture them. If we don't use them, we lose them. And to do that, we had to do a lot more than just sit and think. We had to start by using our hands, practical information, our heart, emotional intelligence, and then our head. Holistic education. Now, had schools learned how to teach that? Had schools of education learned how to provide this? No. Next slide, please. So one would think that this would be the Waldorf moment. Waldorf meets this moment. That is the question. How are we meeting the moment? We are increasingly good. We can still do much more of ensuring that anybody who uses the term, any district, any State Department of Education, any individual saying head, heart, and hand, that they would know that Waldorf education over 100 years ago had already coined this. That is starting to make its inroads, and we learned a lot about that last week from Ruhi. What we are standing on the brink of, and it is our task to do now, is to teach everybody, share with everybody, and deepen with others collectively the understanding of trauma-sensitive education and what role, what contribution Waldorf has there. We have to remember Waldorf education wrote into its charter that it was a healing education. That is novel. That was unprecedented. You educated to heal before you educated to learn. Schools is placing places of healing to become places of learning. Schools is safe space to become places to surge into scientific insight. These are profound programmatic insights of Rudolf Steiner that are now so current and so needed. We need to learn to present them in ways that others can learn about them with us and that we can learn with other allies to together deepen the work. So it's a moment. Now, interesting enough, I should pause. Are there any clarifying questions? Because now we get to the very interesting stuff that will lead to our call to our own action. There has been a bevy of responses in streams of Waldorf education, experienced Waldorf educators who've taken on trauma-sensitive education, sometimes called emergency education, sometimes called emergency and trauma education, all interestingly around the same time. Bernd Ruf with Friends of Waldorf Education, Barbara Schiller, Bernd Ruf with Waldorf Education started emergency in German Notfallpädagogik ohne Grenzen, emergency pedagogy without borders in 2007. He then split off. He was a CEO of Friends of Waldorf Education, then in 2020 split off to make it an independent organization, Emergency Education Without Borders. Friends of Waldorf Education is still doing the work as well. So here are two established organizations that are working on Waldorf trauma-sensitive education. There are two others I want to draw our attention to. And please, one thing I want you to take away from this meeting is to keep an eye on these four. Next slide, please. The other is Start International by Barbara Schiller. I should say that Friends of Waldorf Education and Emergency Pedagogy Without Borders have collectively done roughly 280 interventions globally to intervene in crisis zones. Community school is built on the principles of emergency and trauma education, has been working with Bernd Ruf since 2012. There are trainings both from the Friends of Waldorf Education and Emergency Pedagogy Without Borders that are building teams every year. There is an annual conference in Karlsruhe where this year, 2025, there were 145 attendants from 85 countries, so that is quite impressive, and the numbers are growing. Start International, Barbara Schiller and a team, again, an experienced Waldorf educator. The team is that as well. And they are working very intentionally, specifically START. The ART is for art, and to start with art in emergency zones to work specifically with children and caregivers artistically to confront immediate crises. They too have been working nationally and internationally. And then, very important, Essence of Learning with Beatrice Rudeshauer. She actually is a much smaller team that has worked very intentionally, specifically around if Bernd Ruf and Fiona Friends and Emergency Pedagogy Without Borders are really thinking about coming into the settings of trauma to restabilize communities. Beatrice Rudeshauer with Essence of Learning, learning is in the title, is very interested and committed to how can children readjust to re-enter schooling so they can continue to learn or resume learning after natural or man-made disasters, because that itself is a restabilizer. That is a place that they know, rituals that they can learn again, and hopefully also helped prevent the big gap in learning that all too often happens. And thanks to her focus on restoring students' ability to enter school and re-engage, really focused on the toxic stress of the trauma and helping the students work with the items in their environment that might look like debris and actually incorporate them in imaginative ways so that they can make them parts of their life, so that they can feel more normal, less threatened, and so start to be able to learn. She calls items of debris, if a child then uses it to make play a learning helper. Thanks to this, she's actually been asked in Kurdistan to help form the education policy of the whole country. And it's some very impressive documents of reports on her work. This is all Waldorf trauma sensitive education. Next slide, please. So you have your four players. Also, there's now publications coming, not at all enough yet. Last week spoke about and have often referred to the late, far too young gone Elliot Eisner from Stanford, was my professor, who was one of the first to actually acknowledge and think deeply about Waldorf education, as his interest was how it could enrich education for the child. In beautiful there is his piece, Arts and the Creation of the Mind. In Germany, there is a very interesting person, a doctor in Hamburg, Guditz, who has just come out with, and it's not yet translated in English, Emergencies and Crisis in Schools, where he is in a conversation with Waldorf education. These two, Kuditz and Eisner, are interested in Waldorf education because of what we just said. And we think back to where the call was for what is needed now that there's such a crisis of youth. Remember that author, Miller, from the Edweek, that we now need a holistic setting that is healing. It can't be a session with a therapist. It can't be a session with a doctor. It can't be 1 hour of mindful breathing. We need something holistic. And the question these outsiders asking, what is it of Waldorf that we can learn from here? This is a bit our gold that we have to share, and we want to treasure it and think, what can we give and receive so that we together can build what the time asks of us so urgently now, that holistic place of learning that is trauma sensitive. It is safe and it is sacred. Next slide, please. Another two, and one other one, also this one is not, and there's no plans for translation, but those of us who speak German, since the school shootings are such a mounting issue, that's where there's been some intersection in Germany with Emergency Pedagogy Without Borders, Bernd Ruf, being asked the sites of the amok and terror, so the school shootings, as they're called in English, amok, called in German. And this is a very important researcher on what to do in terms of restabilizing schools in the wake of school shootings. And there's a growing relationship between, especially Thomas Weber and the Waldorf educators who are grappling with emergency pedagogy. On our side, Bernd Ruf, the CEO who I already mentioned of Friends of Waldorf Education and founder of Emergency Pedagogy Without Borders, came out with a book in 2015 or 16 that is valuable to look at as a first effort to write to a broader audience about Waldorf education's contribution. And it was just recently also translated into Portuguese. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the grave challenge. The kids are not all right. We've thought about where it is a Waldorf moment. And now I want to just spend a little bit of time on 3 best practices and 3 lessons learned and then hand it to all of us. And think for a minute also about what trauma is. But the first best practice of the many, but these are the three we're going to focus on. The very first urban public school in the United States, as I think I've shared in this circle, is Urban Waldorf in Milwaukee. It is now closed, and it was founded in 93. And it was in what we call the Milwaukee core, in the heart of what we call a food desert, a bank desert, high crime, high prostitution, very similar to the community of community school. It is it's largely African American and was with long time neglect. And there, the first public Waldorf school was started, urban public Waldorf school. It was the first public Waldorf school. Beautifully, it was urban. It was, in German, you would say, a Brennpunktschule. And one experienced eurythmist, Mary Rood, became a teacher there. And we all know, those of us who've been Waldorf students, that the people that we like to eat for breakfast are our eurythmy teachers, that we would be so not disciplined and we would have such fun and not pay attention. And then as we became adolescents, we really didn't want to go near the eurythmy room because we felt awkward, because we were all so lanky and just growing into our bodies. And it was not a favorite feat. The story of urban Waldorf's eurythmy experience is remarkable, and it teaches us so much about Waldorf as emergency and trauma pedagogy. And the reason we know of this story is because a colleague of ours, Andres Thompson Anderson, is now getting his doctorate at the University of San Diego, while he's also a class teacher at the Sacramento Waldorf School. He's getting his doctorate on doing a historic study on urban Waldorf. And this is an important piece of when we get to lessons learned, that he decided to go back and do a study of this school, although it is now closed. Now, the other group of people that is still thinking about this school, even though it is now closed, are its alum. The students, you see some of them here in this picture, which I love so much. The alums still have a Facebook of Urban Waldorf alum, and they were so happy to speak with Andres about their experience. Mind you, this is a historic study based on interviews of those who graduated from the school. They're now fathers and mothers and in their careers. They are looking back and they're saying one of their highest joys was the eurythmy classes at the Urban Waldorf School. And then you asked why, and they described, and Andres is beautifully, especially interested in Black boys, says they are often seen as a source of problem, the young criminal waiting to grow to be an adult criminal, and not to be trusted, not somebody who is readily engaged. The child that is often neglected or even seen as a problem rather than seen as a great gift. His question was especially if the graduates of the Waldorf School are Black boys, now Black men, adults. They reported, and he will be publishing his dissertation in not too long, they reported how incredibly life-affirming and identity-affirming and community-affirming these eurythmic classes were. But then when you wonder, what did Mary Rood do in these eurythmic classes? She really engaged not just with the traditional eurythmy practices, but also let the children guide some of it. There was great opportunity to improvise. There was great opportunity to also draw from the children and youth's own musical traditions and movement traditions, and built on the key principles of Waldorf eurythmy teaching. Best practice is one, to really draw from the richness of the students before us as we engage in the gold of the practices of Waldorf education. Next slide, please. To be trauma sensitive. The next, I'm sorry that it is a little hard to see, but if you look here on the left, it takes us to a very, very sad, very deeply traumatizing moment in our state and in Los Angeles on January 3rd of this year, 2025. A horrible fire ripped through the Palisades of Los Angeles, and because the city a is a bit in a valley, it sadly, tragically rimmed the city, the vast city, so that the fire rim went all around the city, affecting both the Pasadena Waldorf School, which you see here both before and after the fire, the proud Waldorf School that had been founded in 1972, so an institution of the community. Many generations had gone, graduated, brought their children, as well as the West Side Waldorf School on the other side of town, which also lost their buildings, and many of the teachers and children and families lost their homes, and far more. So the Pasadena Waldorf School, all at once overnight, burned down to the shells that you see if you look on the left in the photo below. Remarkably, when the fire struck, a group of us were just meeting and to plan a training in emergency and trauma pedagogy in Pasadena. Pasadena was going to be the host, and two of the teachers at the Pasadena Waldorf schools are among the most deeply trained emergency and trauma pedagogues in the US. And one of their names is Rosa Balderrama. And Rosa is here on the right, on the far right with her, the person on the furthest to the right. Rosa and her colleague Joelle, who were in our Zoom that night, and then we realized we had to stop because news was that they would have to evacuate. They both lost not just their school, but their house. Rosa lost her house where she'd raised all her children, and she and her husband had lived for the past 25 years. So trauma, not just for Rosa herself, but then also, of course, for her classroom. She'd been a teacher there. She has been a teacher there for the past 17 years, and this whole beautiful school. How to respond. And Rosa, kindergarten teacher, stayed with the children, worked deeply with the children, and stayed with the families. That is what you see here to the right, really using the rituals of Waldorf education, trauma sensitive, to sit together and think how we can support each other. This is not the school. This is where they could stay for a little bit as they were starting to rebuild. And she worked with the children in the classrooms, really thinking deeply about what stories she was going to tell so that the children could optimally reground, restore themselves. She did tell the stories that she would always tell, but she chose the ones that really focused on meeting a great challenge and then overcoming it. And she avoided any that had fire in them. Next slide, please. And then the third best practice. So you adapt to the situation is the best practice in the case of Rosa, working with yourself, your community, your parents, and your children. Now, the third best practice, this takes us out of the board, across the borders from the US to Sao Paulo, Brazil. Some of you might be familiar with Monte Azul, Uta Kramer's community, which is in one of the most impoverished sections and crime-ridden sections of Sao Paulo. And Reinaldo Nascimento here on the left was a 3-year-old when his mother chanced upon Monte Azul and brought Reinaldo there so that he would not be shot, as Reinaldo put it, because his mother had to go to work and he didn't want his brothers and his sister, her sons and daughter, to be in harm's way because she had to go earn a living. So Reinaldo graduated from there and then grew up to dedicate his life to emergency and trauma pedagogy, and is now working with us beautifully in our US team, since he and Sao Paulo and Monte Azul have so much to teach us. So Reinaldo Nascimento has been working with the children in the deeply impoverished communities here you see in Sao Paulo, again, taking the songs and stories that the children bring, not the ones from Goethe, but what the songs that the children give, and use those to do what we know Waldorf education does best, crossing the midline, moving up and down, working on balance, that now also neurological research is showing is so key for trauma-sensitive care. Next slide, please. So then we had our 3 best practices, now our lessons learned. First of all, to collaborate within and without for coherence, for building collective capacity. This is a wonderful example of this is back to Milwaukee, Urban Waldorf School. They started one of the teachers, the teacher who you see here, with the tallest among us, decided to offer a dad's club. And this is actually a club for children, many of whom don't have dads, did not have dads. This is all retrospective. And he created the Dads Club so that the children, these young boys, could have the pride and the experience of the Dads Club. And the principal, Dorothy St. Charles, didn't say, that's not Waldorf enough, that's not what we're going to do. But that was absolutely such a critical piece, and so critical to address a very important issue in that community and in many of our communities of our boys being underserved in terms of nurturance and love. Next slide, please. And furthermore, sorry about the duplicate there. And second, furthermore, we have the collaboration within and without of coherence. I had mentioned how important it is that we talk with each other. It is also so important that we talk outside of our beautiful Waldorf communities. This circle that we have here is gold, and so beautiful when we can match that with circles where we go out into other academic circles and share our learning. And here on the right, we have a picture of some of us at the American Education Research Association gathering in last year in Denver, California, where we just offered a panel on Waldorf education and touched on trauma. The focus was scale, touched on trauma. And here, the second from the left is actually Andre Anderson, who we are grateful to for the research on urban Waldorf. And here on the second to the right, actually, is our friend Monique Brinson, who some of us know well, who's a former principal at community school. And on the far left is Kyla Strong, who is a coach at community school. But very important that we go out into these other academic quarters to work with others, learn what are you teaching and learning about emergency and trauma pedagogy, and what are we doing so that we can blend together, but also so that Waldorf education becomes common norm in the discourse around how we can meet the current challenge, which everybody is conducting. Everybody should learn to think, who are we going to call as Waldorf? Next slide, please. And finally, this lesson learned to work with the world of our students and educators to transform from within. On our right, we see youth that Reinaldo Nascimento has been working with, and they're working on making a lamp. And the lamp is made out of paper. And the paper here we got from the 99-cent store. We didn't have to go to Stockmeyer. We didn't have to order it from Germany. This is from the 99-cent store on the corner. The beauty of the ball is that there's no glue, no staples, nothing. It's just folding. And the pride of the students have created this together. This is trauma-sensitive education and building sense of efficacy and beauty. So working with the world of our students and educators. On the left is working with the principals of the district Hinaudo was working on and getting them all to knit. And that everybody knew they had wool. It's just that many of them had never thought that knitting would be an important pedagogical device. But here too, we're seeing Waldorf education making its inroads of what trauma-sensitive education looks like now that everybody needs it. Getting our adults, our educators to knit so that they can teach the knitting. Next slide, please. So our call to action is that we join in looking ahead for imaginative, joyous transformation towards, we talk about post-traumatic stress, towards post-traumatic growth. And if you just take a minute to look at what you see here. Is anybody noticing anything?
Yeah, that reminds me of the El Sistema system, where it's in many cultures it's easier to join a gang than an orchestra. And here they're, what is it, changing their swords into plowshares, except they're into trombones and things. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't see who this was, but thank you for that.
Elizabeth, sorry.
Oh, yes, no, thank you. Yes, that is it. So the changing of trombones to plow swords into trombones. That is the task of Waldorf education, that we know how to do it and we can sing it from the mountaintops and gather with others to do it better, more deeply, ever more. And thank you for your time. And now I would like to invite us to stop sharing, and see if there are remarks, especially those 3 questions I offered you.
I'll jump in. Sorry.
Yes, no, I thought I should repeat my questions.
No,
Yes.
no, sorry. It always takes a minute, doesn't it, for it to sink in and for questions to formulate. But what I particularly appreciated was your seating it in a historical context and just seeing where this all comes from, why we're here now. It's not just a sudden apparition. It's really, it's rooted and it has branches, what you brought. And I really appreciated that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can't wait to read the book.
Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this talk, Ida. It's really been opening up a lot of thoughts. I really appreciate how we're looking at taking this Waldorf healing pedagogy out into the world. But I guess my wonder is, are we doing enough of Waldorf healing pedagogy within our schools? And is there more that could happen there? Yeah. And if that could be a part of the book, perhaps, right? How can we take the gems from what's happening with these amazing groups and bring more consciousness into our teaching within the schools?
Well, thank you so much for saying that, Sarah. It actually came up when I was speaking with one Waldorf teacher who was sharing that they were doing emergency drills because it was mandated in their school, and they had not yet found the way to articulate that we really think deeply about emergency drills, and we think deeply about the impact on trauma, and we have real ways to respond. So I couldn't agree more that we can ourselves be much more proud, but also more fluent in what we have in place and we can draw from. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat, Ida,
Yeah.
from Michael. Can you see it? Do you want to read it yourself?
Michael, can you read it?
Michael Gannon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ida. This is absolutely wonderful. My question is, where do you see the greatest assets towards trauma-informed pedagogy in our traditional Waldorf practices? What are the things that we're doing that work the best? And then where do you see the greatest need currently for Waldorf teachers to develop new skills and practices in our schools to continue being the outstanding places to work in this way?
Oh, that's not a small one. Thank you. I see the biggest asset is that we understand about coherence, art-infused coherence, that it isn't just coherence in terms of lesson schedules. It's not just coherence in terms of aligning our math plans, but that it is a deep coherence from when you cross the threshold of the school, that the architecture is coherent, the space is coherent, the rhythm of the day is coherent, the stories are coherent, what the teacher does with the individual and with the class, there's coherence. And then in that embedded the coherence of the scaled curriculum. So that is an absolute jewel. And it seems so obvious when you say it, but it is so profound because if you know that that's what you need, and more researchers are realizing that. Tony Bright came out with um, uh, curricular program coherence as the biggest, latest thing that we need to do. And Michael Fullan wrote a book on coherence that became a bestseller. But we don't yet know to say, well, look at Waldorf education as doing that. I mean, Michael Rawson and his new book is doing a wonderful job starting to shine the light, but that is a huge, important piece. And then the big challenge is we can't say, don't walk in here because you're disturbing my coherence. You're out of step, you're noisy, you're deregulated. I need to put you in another school because otherwise we can't be coherent. No, it's being coherent around the chaos. That is the healing education. That is the trauma sensitive education. And I think that's the next step. I hope that resonates a bit.
Absolutely. That's such a beautiful way to put it. Thank you.
Christoph.
Thank you, Ida. It was wonderful. That coherence that resounded very much in me. The coherence is possible if people work together. And working together today, in the experience I have, is one of the biggest problems that teachers feel that they have to be together to make a surrounding, to make a community. And everyone is so extremely individual that the collaboration, working together, what ends in coherence, is in normal schools today, in normal Waldorf schools here on the continent, not easy. Can you tell me what were the first steps you did to achieve that we have to do it together?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Christoph. I think one we have to do study, but if I think in terms of steps, body steps, that we always started in one big circle, the whole school in one circle, and really thinking of adults and children, we are head, heart, and hands, that we start then, and I think you were there when we did our circle, that we sing in the different languages of the children, and we speak a verse in the different languages, and we stomp our feet and do movement in the different traditions. I mean, not all at the same time, but rotating, so that people know that we are one, that where I stand determines that I'm only here, but I'm here, and on my right and my left and across from me, that we are a whole that is more than the sum of the parts.
And that you did on a daily basis.
We did that every day, and that so it really would get into the cellular level of the children. And by the way, you might know the verse. We always said in our different languages, the poem, "This is our school. Let peace dwell here. Let the rooms be filled with abundance." And I was very interested that one of the children that has been absolutely the most challenging to all of us adults, after we came back from COVID, and there was a setting, and somebody said, "Well, let's start to say our verse again." And this child all at once stood up and said the whole verse. It's a very long verse. And it was so moving. I thought this has been with him through COVID, that he could bring it back like this. So I think that's coherence.
How you engage the parents in this process?
That they are there. When the parents, we encourage them to stay for the circle, so that we are all together, and we don't want them to stay outside, standing outside, making sure their child behaves, but that we all make the circle bigger so everybody's in it.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat from Christian. Christian, can you read it yourself?
Yes. And thank you very much, Ida, for your talk. When I listen to you, I got the impression that I live in a bubble of total prosperity in my school. And do you think that there are points of contact for trauma-sensitive Waldorf education in a context of well-fed middle-class children in Germany? Because the number of mental health emergencies has also increased in this country in recent years, and so there are events that are relevant, but I don't know how to pick up den roten Faden.
Den roten Faden. Oh, well, thank you. Just to clarify, Christian, were you thinking to partner with other schools, or how to actually incorporate it in one's own school?
Incorporated.
Oh,
To
incorporate it.
incorporate this in my school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I think, thank you. I think that what we're learning, and that's why it was so interesting, this is not just where other people's children and other people's community, but this is all of us, that here the common trauma is a common opportunity. We all need to be re-regulated. We all need to start to again reclaim the sense of being safe in this circle with others. So I venture to say that it was so important for us all to start in our circle with our verse and our song and our movement, and have the regular rhythms. Also, when there was all kinds of things happening outside, you might have a more calm outside physically, but in the hearts of the children, there's probably just terrible turmoil, or among the more vulnerable, because it is the trauma is cutting across class and race. So I think in a way it's an opportunity to join, and I do think that the rhythms and the rituals are one of the most powerful entry points, and you don't have to start doing big lectures. Can be a very gentle entry. And it can bring joy. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
There's a question from Heike in the chat. Heike, can you read it yourself?
Yeah. So thank you, Ida. You can't see me because my video is not working.
It's okay.
Uh-huh. I had the difficulty often to reach teachers in the state schools, especially in the COVID time, and they never they would never accept the parents entering their school or doing some circle work with the children. And I found afterwards, I found myself still with a big question, how to integrate, how to bring them to a circle, how to to interact because they have such big fear. I don't know how to overcome their fear. That's in basic my question.
Heike, I want to make sure I understand. This is public schools you're referring
Yes, yes,
or Waldorf schools.
yes, because very often I had to deal with public schools and not with Waldorf people.
Yeah, no, it's a very it's as it's a huge challenge and an opportunity. But right now, while also those schools, I'm sure, are grappling with children with tremendous stress and nervousness and more serious challenges, then to think actually starting in a circle and starting with some more rhythms in the school day and week and year, that can be curative is, and rather than waiting for the child to be so deregulated that they go into a room and by themselves with some therapist is in a circle, that's a real shift of mind. It requires a cognitive shift, a paradigmatic shift. And that's why we have, and not you by yourself, but we as a group, we as a collective, we have the task to really start to sing from the mountaintops more our effective practices so people can start to trust and learn, because otherwise the weight of tradition is going to push towards saying, I don't have time for this. Already there's so much going on, and this child has that. This is just a nice to have, and we don't have time for extras.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wish I could help, but I think it's, I think the one thing I would add is that now we have the wind of research in our back. So sometimes, especially the principal or whoever the lead teacher, they might be interested in the research that shows all that I've described. And then they probably care about the test scores. So if you can make very clear that straight line between those rhythms and other activities to make it feel safe, like a circle, to the kid performing on the tests, that is often the hook.
Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yes, you asked about likes, and I'm moving towards the wonder part of your task that you set us.
Thank you.
And I wonder if I think this is probably politically very incorrect in this particular circle, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Waldorf schools, especially in the Western United States that I'm familiar with, have been seen as kind of artsy-fartsy schools, right? This is an art school. It's not rigorously academic. And perhaps this is a leftover from my childhood or whatever, but I wonder how to balance the notion of Waldorf education is a healing education, which it is, with the potential of Waldorf education to also be extremely valuable academically for children.
Where you need the one to get to the other.
Yes, that's true. How do we make that apparent?
Right. So, I mean, I probably everybody has some good thoughts there, but I do want to go back to research being the wind in our back on that. I mean, every time people toss off the phrase social emotional learning, it's not because they care about arts. It's often because they're saying they learn that that's an important thing to have in school, the social and emotional, because it gets to the L, it gets to the learning. So we can harness that and then say, we've been doing it for much longer. So we know, going back to coherence, that it can't just be a social emotional learning coach and it can't just be a social emotional learning class, but let's think about creating the whole as a social emotional learning space to get to the L, the learning.
That's really a valuable perspective. Thank you. Explicit perspective. Yeah. Not implicit, right? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, Christoph.
I'm happy to say also something to Elizabeth Seward. Learning as such, if we do it in the right way, and probably that's the Waldorf way, but learning as such is a health-giving quality. Children always want to learn, and they need the experience that they have learned something. If they get that experience that they have learned something, that is a health-giving quality. So there you see the bridge from Waldorf to academic. Another aspect of learning is what we do in the arts, and that have then more a regulation quality where we regulate the different qualities of the human being in a way that is also integrating. Health giving is always integrating all elements in the human being. So learning in the Waldorf school is, if it is done in the Waldorf way, probably the most essential part of education. That I just wanted to add. It is not about art in the Waldorf. It is about learning.
I absolutely agree. My point was a little shifted from that about the perception of Waldorf education. I mean, we all know that all of these things belong together, but we're often misperceived, I think.
That's true, yeah.
But thank you for your response. It's really true.
I wanted, say to your remarks, but if I could just add there, it is also just because we are here, an academic group, it's also a publishing task and a promoting task that we really get the word out on this. Christoph, that's a beautiful line you just said, but to just write briefs. We need to really flood the zone with this information, and this is the right moment to do it because back to Helga's question, everybody's trying to get the children back on track. And this is an opportunity to say this, how learning can be rich.
Ines, there's quite a long chat comment. Can you put it in short words? Our audio isn't working. So what can I make out of it? Not to read everything. So what I understand, there are a lot of psychological programs and concepts and new names for disorders and so on. So it's a bit of over psychologing and medication awareness. And for every new thing, for anxiety, there is a new name. And so there is some kind of a mental focus right now. And the question is, after COVID, it has been increased. And if this kind of a psychological focus, is this what we want in Waldorf schools? I hope I have summarized it in the way Ines meant it.
Let me try to respond. I'm really glad that you say this, Ines. The point is to be proactive rather than retroactive. When we say we're creating healing spaces, it's not because that means that we're bringing in a wheelbarrow of medicines. To the contrary, it's that we're thinking ahead and creating the places where those things are prevented. And if a child is traumatized, where we have these very natural means to respond to it, there are moments where Waldorf educators by themselves cannot do all, and then we need to be joined by professional therapists. But the cure is that we are ahead of the curve. We're not laggers, but leaders.
Just write in the comment if you want to add something, Ines. Now it's Will's turn.
Hi, Will.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for that talk. I just wanted to share my experience as a new class teacher. I had a boy in my class who joined after kind of quite a traumatic time at other schools. And he settled, well, it took him a while to settle. And at first there was a lot of kind of challenging behavior. And yeah, you could tell he was, well, I could tell he was kind of dysregulated because, he was really hot all the time and looked like he was kind of sweating. Um, and yeah, I think just from being in a warm learning community, and having my support and being, me being a constant in his life was really helpful for him. So I see massive potential for trauma in that way, and for Waldorf being a healing education. I think my a place where I feel needs to a potential for growth is like teacher training, and Christoph's comment about learning being a health giving experience, and the actual experience of learning, giving that rather than thinking, God, I've got to, create a kind of artistic thing to do maths. Actually, learning can be a wonderful health giving thing in itself. Is such a valuable takeaway for me. But I feel as a new teacher, I have to do so much work to know how to just help these children learn things. So perhaps there's a link to kind of one, teacher training to allowing these health giving benefits, but also I think there needs to be more I can't think of the word now. Responsibility for teachers to engage with that constant renewal in their own professional understanding, that to try and always renew that and be able to see that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. And first of all, hands off, hats off that you are here in this lecture if you are also in the first year with your class and that child. That's beautiful. Thank you.
So that helps. Yeah.
I actually am so glad you mentioned that. The charge in teacher education and Waldorf teacher education, but then in all teacher education, to have a whole strand on trauma sensitive care and what is trauma is so important. And we absolutely need that. And we need that every place. Right here, we're working on getting it into our Waldorf teacher training, but then to work with UCLA, an established university, to have it in mainstream education as also a way to get Waldorf in because we have so much to offer there. But we cannot let teachers, it's not fair. It is hard to go into the profession and you haven't yourself had deeper training in what you yourself have just so artfully identified. What are the symptoms of your students being traumatized and what is helping him restabilize and feel safe? And especially that it is not his fault and that it's not because he's lazy or he's a bad boy. So thank you for saying that. And yes, in fact, here in America with our efforts, and then Renato in Nascimento in Brazil was just hired by the local university, the state university, to write a textbook and teach a lesson on trauma education, trauma sensitive education, because there's such trauma there. They're also in the wake of a horrible flood. And they realized the teachers didn't even know what to do with themselves or the other. That's the other. It's vicarious trauma, secondary trauma you get when your child has been exposed to that. So self-care is so key. Thank you.
Kiki, I don't know but if I'm mistaken, but I think you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to also add to Christian earlier on. I think exactly the secondary traumatization, we mustn't underestimate what's living in the society. And even in Germany, I think through the media, and may I say, even through the games, through the movies and things like that, I think the beauty of the trauma sensitive education and what Waldorf has to offer is that we already counteracting things in before they happen. So we establishing that muscle that will help us to overcome if there should be ever a crisis. And yeah, that was most my add-on to that.
Well, Kiki, I'm so glad. So Kiki is leading a very big team of emergency trauma pedagogues in, I think in not in Johannesburg. Yeah, in Johannesburg or in Johannesburg. So thank you for that. And I'm very glad that we're here together. So if I missed anything, I should add.
Yeah, are there other comments or questions?
And thank you for all the comments. You're really helping me with my book.
Not so far as I can see. We are at the end of our time. Thank you so much, Ida, for this wonderful lecture. Thank you, Rosa, for your support. And I'm happy to announce the next lecture next week by Rubina Sentu, How Imaginative is Waldorf? Rubina comes from Canada, and I'm really looking forward to it. Yes, thank you so much, and I wish you a good week and all the best for you. Thank you, Ida.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you all.